Well, you're very welcome, and I'm happy to be back and teaching again. It's been 4 years. I figured approximately since the last time I was asked to do a class. COVID happened, and a lot of the people that were hiring me to teach realized, well, we can just get it online for $50. So why would we pay Turpen to drive to Roswell and do a class? And so it kind of ended the teaching part of what I was doing, which I enjoy immensely. I always learn a lot when I put a class together, and then from the questions of the class and everything, I think teaching is the way to demonstrate you know it, and then also fill in some of the things that you may not really understand about that. But I want to thank Palms and Associates too for, man, what a beautiful place to hold a meeting. The view is incredible, looking out on Albuquerque, and this office couldn't be nicer, really. It's great. And the Independent Agents Association for doing this. I've always felt that an Independent Agents Association is really important to you and your career and your insurance agency. They're that piece that holds a lot of things together in our community. They're our voice for the legislature when things come up, and we don't pay attention to that all the time, but Matt does and Rachel does, and they're helping guide the legislatures through the process of, we may get insurance laws that you just can't even imagine, because the people in the legislatures up there, they don't understand insurance any better than your average client. And they've been told, well, let's do this. Well, Matt and Rachel can help guide them through that process, and they do that for us. And then along with that, they give education. They have, all kinds of materials. If you're looking for something educational-wise, just touch base with Rachel. She can find it for you. She can guide you through that. My name is, I go by Kit. Real name is Christopher. My dad nicknamed me after Kit Carson. He liked everything Mountain Men, and so he gave me the nickname Kit as a child, and it just stuck. And it's really good for sales because people don't know very many Kits. So they normally will remember your name and be able to realize who it is that's calling on the phone when you call them. So I was nicknamed after Kit Carson, and of course, living in New Mexico, there's all kinds of Kit Carson stuff, whether you're in Taos or anywhere around this area. He was quite a character. There's a great new book out. It's been out maybe 5 years, Blood and Thunder. And it's about you've read that? Oh man, that is great. And there is a chapter in it about Kit Carson, who he was and what he did. And he doesn't pull any punches. I mean, he was not a saint or any of that kind of stuff, but the things that he was able to do were absolutely remarkable. There is a list of why somebody would have him lead them out to California, or he would be on their wagon train or whatever. So I heartily recommend that book. If you love New Mexico and you want to hear about the history of how this state was founded and why some of the things are the way they are, Blood and Thunder. It was written by, I think, a university professor here at UNM. Great book for New Mexico and what New Mexico is all about. Thanks to the Independent Agents Association. Thank you to Palms for allowing us to use their space here. Really appreciate that. I'll go for 50 minutes and then give you a 10-minute break. Now, during that 10-minute break, I would like you to look over the questions on the quiz sheet, and then at the very end of the class, we'll go through the answers for you, because a lot of them are not that easy. I had a friend, he worked for life insurance. That was his whole thing, life and health insurance. And he was interviewing for a job at one point, and he had to take an ethics exam before this company would hire him. This ethics exam had 250 questions. Guess how many he could miss and still be hired by this company? What do you think? 90%? 80%?
To get 100.
He had to get 100%. If he missed one question, he was no longer eligible to interview. And he said they weren't easy. You know, you've got questions in there that make you question yourself, kind of a thing. So ethics and morals are probably the most important thing that you're going to address in your career. You know, the state legislature and the insurance department says you've got to have 24 hours of education every 2 years to renew your license, but they mandate 3 hours of ethics. They don't say mandate you're selling auto insurance, you got to have 3 hours of auto, or you're a commercial person, you got to have, but they say you have to have 3 hours of ethics. And it's like, I've always thought that was kind of odd, especially for legislators to tell us that we need ethics, but that on the side, it is and will be important to you throughout your entire life. This piece is your foundation. It's your foundation, it's your agency foundation, it's the companies you represent's foundation. So we'll go through pieces of this and talk about it a little more at length during this morning. This is a 3-hour class, so at basically noon, you guys can throw me out and say, that's Turpen, that's enough. You need to go home. But that's the plan. If you weren't intending to take an ethics class, you're in the wrong place. You may need to move on, but that's what we're doing this morning. When my kids were young, I have 3 children, we found this book, The Book of Virtues. And it has little stories and poems and writing throughout. This is not the kind of material that you're probably going to find in the public school system. But I'll read a little bit, just the first paragraph of this book. This book is intended to aid in the time-honored task of the moral education of the young. Moral education, the training of heart and mind toward the good, involves many things. It involves rules and precepts, the do's and don'ts of life, and others as well, as explicit instruction, exhortation, and training. Moral education must provide training in good habits. Aristotle wrote that good habits formed at youth make all the difference, and moral education must affirm the central importance of moral example. It has been said that there is nothing more influential, more determinant in a child's life than the moral power of quiet example. For children to take morality seriously, they must be in the presence of adults who take morality seriously. And with their own eyes, they must see adults take morality seriously. Now, you are all parents or going to be parents, or your uncles or aunts or grandparents right now. And this is something where I would charge you to be a watchman. Your job is to be a watchman for your family, for your agency, for the companies you're representing. I want you to stand as a watchman in morals and ethics in everything that's going on in your life. That's why I said it really is the foundation of who we are. I got licensed to sell insurance in 1980, so way back there. I was a junior in college, getting a degree, I realized, in political science, which means you can't really do anything. So my dad had always been an insurance salesman, and so I went to him and I said, what's this insurance thing about? You know, I was 20 years old. And he said, well, here's the concepts and foundations of what insurance is. And when I asked him about working in insurance, he described it. He says, well, it's kind of like a suit of clothes. You try it on, see how it fits, and then you look at the people around you and see how they respond to you in this suit of clothes that you're wearing and what you're doing. And if you like it and they like it, it might be a good fit. Now, that's an interesting way to tell your son, well, I don't know if you're going to be successful at this, but go ahead and get into insurance and let's see if it's a good fit. And it did end up being a good fit. You know, here 46 years later, I'm still working, producing predominantly commercial insurance, but I also sell life insurance and personal insurance, and I'll advise somebody on anything but health insurance. That's one of the areas where I did long ago sell some insurance, but I cut that off and said, no, it's not what I want to spend my time doing. Trying to figure out what Obamacare is all about and what the rules and regs are and what the exclusion, all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, no. I jumped out of that. And securities. I held security licenses for 10 years, but decided that also is not how I make money and feel good about what I'm doing. So I hold licenses in all lines of insurance, but I don't actively produce health insurance or securities at this point. I could go back into some of that, but I really don't want to. I like my life and what I'm doing at this point. So there were friends, 4 friends who loved to golf together. And they went out to this golf course that they didn't usually golf at. And they were playing golf and kept bumping up to this group in front of them. And they were the worst golfers they had ever seen. They'd hit it off into the woods, and then they'd hit it off on the other side, and then they would just chase around and try to find their balls everywhere. And the greenskeeper came by and they said, hey, what's up with this group in front of us? I mean, not only are they slow, they're the most horrid golfers we've ever seen. And the greenskeeper says, you know, that's a good story. We had a fire in the supply tough shed, and they came and put the fire out, but the chemicals got in their eyes, and they're almost completely blind. So they can't see and follow the ball. But they risked their lives to get that fire out, and so we let them come and play anytime they want to. And these golfers said, you know, that's wonderful. And one of them, an optometrist, he says, you know, there are things they can do with glasses that may be able to help those gentlemen. And this other guy, he sold drugs and pharmaceuticals, and he said, you know, there's some wonderful stuff they're doing with some of the new drugs that might be able to help them. And the third guy was a minister, and he says, you know, because they risk their lives and everything, I'm going to pray for them and see if that might help. The fourth guy was an attorney, and he says, why don't they play at night? So, come on, it deserves a little better than that. I know we're not all golfers, so we're not necessarily the very best. Okay. Ethics and morals. As I said, I was kind of questioning when the 3 years for ethics rule came out. Why? So, what do you guys think? Why would the legislature or the insurance department say you have to take 3 hours of ethics every 2 years? It is.
taking care of our customers and clients, and it's information that's often challenged and is easy to forget sometimes.
Yeah.
So a good annual, or not annual, but every couple of year refresher is appropriate, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly right. You know, practice. If you want to be a violinist, a virtuoso violinist, you're going to have to practice a lot. When I was a little kid, I played the cello for like 7 years. And I never became a really good cellist because I wouldn't practice enough. I don't know, there was something in my mind saying, yeah, you don't have to spend 2 hours a day playing the cello in order to become great. And I wasn't willing to give up the time out playing basketball or baseball or the things I really loved. So I didn't do it. But anything in your life where you want to become expert requires practice. Now, I've told you that ethics and morals are the foundation of what you're doing. Practice is important. I mean, why is it do we have any scouts in the room? Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, used to be, that kind of thing? Well, at every Cub Scout meeting, they give the Scout pledge. So they're pledging every meeting, on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times and to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. So they're emphasizing that in that environment. This is who we want you to be and who we want you to become. So this moral and ethical requirement is really asking us to do some practice. And I realize that where we get into trouble is when the lights aren't all on. People aren't really watching what's going on. And we're not willing to actually expose something that's happened. I would recommend to you that you start today, right now, saying if there's something that needs to get out there and be told reasonably, but bring it to the attention of the people that you respect. Ask them about it. What is it? Here's what I've got. What should I do? You don't have to put it on KOB. If the TV comes to interview you, trust me, it's not going to be a good day. It's stuff going on that you probably should have known about or do know about, and you do not want to discuss it with them. But before that happens, I would recommend let's get it out into the light and let's talk about it. Talk about what your options are, what you can do. I was on the board of directors for a charter school here in town several years ago, and we had just let out for the summer, and the kids were gone, and the teachers were in, cleaning out their class, all that kind of stuff. And I get a call. I'm on the board. I get a call from one of the board members, and they said the FBI is in the parking lot with 3 black vans, and they're loading all of our financial records into their vans. Do you know what's going on? And it's like, no, I don't know what's going on. Do you know what's going on? She said, no. She said, and I have no idea what this is all about. Well, after 2 days, I still had heard nothing. And we didn't have our financial records. We couldn't pay our teachers or principal or any of that kind of stuff. So I summoned up my courage and I called the FBI. And I said, I'm Mr. Turpen. I'm the incoming president of the board at this charter school. Why did you come and take all our financial records? What is going on? And they said, it's dead silence for a couple of minutes. He says, will you talk to us? It's like, well, hell yes, I'll talk to you. What do you need to know? What's going on? And what it came out to be was our chief financial officer had turned in evidence that the director of that school was stealing state monies. He didn't tell anybody but the FBI and the State Department, and boy, oh boy, I'm going to tell you, it was a wild 2-year period getting this unraveled. Things I should have known were going on, things that I should have figured out in that. So be very careful, as a insurance agent and agency owner, you'll be asked to join boards. Be careful and make sure they've got good E&O insurance, D&O insurance for the directors and officers for whatever it is you're doing, because that's what's going to pay the attorneys to defend you and keep you out of trouble. I mean, none of the board, we were just a voluntary board. We didn't even get paid. There was no pointing of fingers that there was something that we had done wrong, but this guy did get away with a couple $1 million of state money over about a 10-year period. So being willing to call the authorities and say, and no, I'm clean. Whatever you want to know, I will help you investigate it. I will support you in what you're looking for, and you go ahead and do your work, and I'll help you, and we'll get through this. So that guy did a couple of years in prison and restitution for over $1 million. So it wild. But where do you get the ethical and moral strength to not be so afraid that you can step forward and say, what do you need to know? That's what, in this book of virtues, he was saying, this needs to be demonstrated. It needs to be demonstrated with the people you're working with. It needs to be demonstrated with your family, especially with your children. Let them know this is who I am and this is what I stand for. Another good practical thing that we sometimes just overlook, is going to church every Sunday. Do you really think that pastor or that priest is going to tell you something brand new? Something that you never thought about? No, it's practicing what is right and what is good over and over each Sunday is the principal reason for religion and church. So, oh gosh, I didn't start my clock, but if I hit 50 minutes, let me know and I'll take a break. I'll get that on next time. All right. Let me find I actually have a PowerPoint presentation for you all, so give you something else besides my mug to look at. I assume that most of the people in the room are salespeople. I love this quote. The only thing you got in the world is what you can sell. And the funny thing is, you're a salesman and you don't know that. That's Arthur Miller. So what is an ethical or moral foundation? Anybody got a short little definition of what you would call that? I've asked you to stand for that, to be a watchman in your life, to be ethical, to practice good moral character, the virtues that basically of who you are. But I don't think you're going to find a precise definition of what that is. Thus the 3 hours every 2 years of, well, let's re-examine that and see what it really is. Where can we find, or where do we find a trusted ethical foundation? Most organizations will have some type of ethical foundation that you're going to work, like the Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, the credo that I read to you. I noticed back on the wall, the Palms standard. They want you to be fearless. They want you to be dedicated. And the one that fits best is they want you to be accountable. Now, you're also going to find these same kinds of things with any service groups that you might join. The Rotary Club, the Masons, the whatever, they're going to have a litany of different foundational, ethical foundations where, you know, they think you need to focus your time and mental energies. Why is an ethical foundation important in selling? Well, as you were saying, it's really important. I mean, for your agency, the agency you represent, to succeed in the future, how many times do you have to lie before somebody says you're a liar? It just once, you know, and it'll just destroy your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your friend, with, you know, that kind of thing, your clients. Trust me, we see people out there in the business world, surprisingly in the insurance world, and they do things and you think, that's not right, you know? We think, oh, they're getting ahead by not doing the foundational work of what's true and what's honest and what's right. In my experience over the years, that never lasts. It may build up for a short time and then it'll just collapse. From a historical perspective, who established our standards of moral and ethical perspective? Who was it in your life that taught you what it means to be honest and upright?
Parents.
Who?
Parents.
Parents.
Teachers.
Yeah.
Siblings.
Yeah.
Occasionally a friend.
Occasionally a friend, a good friend. A good friend will tell you when you're off base and when you're doing something you probably shouldn't. Those are the kind of friends you should cling to, is those that'll tell you the truth even when it hurts. You know, there's something about when you're struggling with an ethical dilemma, you don't know what to do. The most painful decision that you can make is usually the right decision. Someone told me that once. So as you're saying, well, I could skate out of this by just, you know, hiding a little bit or saying, well, I didn't know or whatever. But the best decision is usually the hardest decision. So look at it that way next time something comes around and think about, well, what's it going to cost me to do that? And you'll have to trust me that right decision will pay big at some point in your life. Most people won't make that hard decision. They just won't. But if you want to stand out and stand up, make those hard decisions in your life that you have to. Well, and then how to develop an ethical decision-making model. The agency where I'm working now, one of the things that we like to do is bring those questions to the producer group and talk about it. So we will bring up some hard things and discuss them. So as I described earlier, you can do this yourself, but if you'll create an atmosphere where we do this regularly, and that's just understood. We're going to look at these things that are going to keep us out of an E&O situation and talk about it and make sure we're doing the best we can. It doesn't just happen. We like things that are easy. We like things that are simple, and we like things that are uncomplicated. How do we do the hard things? That is something I would recommend for your agency, is possibly considering, discussing that at your meetings with the people in the room. It's hard, but it will make a difference in your agency. It will move it to a different level. Oh, wait, going the wrong way. Okay, so when we talk about ethics, there are actually two different wings of what is ethical. There's what they call ethical absolutism, and that's the philosophical belief that certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of the context and situation or the consequences. So, like, you should never harm a child. Pretty straightforward, simple. I think everybody would agree with that. You should never kill somebody. Murder it's wrong. And we're actually seeing examples of the ethical other side saying, well, maybe it's okay to murder somebody. Think about that. That would be unimaginable to my grandparents or my parents, and now I'm living through a time and age where it might be acceptable to assassinate somebody who is the president of a healthcare group or an individual who speaks out. What a change that has become in our world today. And then we've got the other side of it, ethical relativism, the philosophical view that moral principles are not absolute or universally true. Instead, what is considered morally right or wrong depends entirely on the context, such as one's culture, society, or personal perspective. This, I believe, is... So, ethical absolutism, we find this as, you're studying history or ancient history, especially ancient history. You come on examples of how that culture, how that society was able to build, to grow, to become something the world hadn't seen before. We have the foundation of the Ten Commandments in religion. The Code of Hammurabi is an amazing, Hammurabi was like 400 BC and built this empire that was just amazing. And one of the things he established, let's see if I've got some pictures here. There we go. I was in England last year and actually saw one of these stone obelisks that they found. It's thought to be, at least as far as we know, the first law system created in the Middle East, in a Middle East civilization. Laws were written in stone and then placed in a public location So everyone can take a look at the 282 laws that citizens should obey. The laws might seem hard by today's standards, but Hammurabi created those laws because he wants everyone to be responsible. And what I see a lot today is you're not responsible for you or your life or your decisions. And it's like, that's just not true. And it doesn't create a society where you can move forward. It's like hiding, I think. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is found in all of these different religions. So foundationally, you're going to find something almost exactly like the do unto other in any of these religions. This is something I bumped into a while back when I was looking or studying ethics. Gandhi was quite the thinker. He did a lot of brilliant, absolutely brilliant things without violence, without guns and bombs and that kind of thing. And these were the 7 principles that he lived his life on. And he said that wealth without work is evil. You are not going to get ahead by simply becoming wealthy when you didn't put anything into it. And it won't last. Think about people that, win the lottery. They're more broke 2 years later than they were when they won the lottery because they don't know how to work with money. And their relatives and friends and everything, it goes like the wind, like sand through their fingers. So wealth without work is a bad thing. Pleasure without conscience. You have to have the ethical foundation to understand that if you don't have any conscience about what you're doing, this is what we're telling our kids as they're going to school and starting to date and that kind of thing. It's kind of like, you need to be responsible for your actions, for what it's going to do to you and what it's going to do to your partner. Pleasure without conscience is just a terrible thing. Knowledge without character. So just knowing something is not the end game. I had a teacher in junior high, and he had fought in the Second World War. He said his group went into one of Hitler's generals' homes to gather as much intel as they possibly could. And he said the amazing thing about this guy, who was one of the generals responsible for the death camps, was the books, the literature, the art. He said you couldn't believe that a person this educated would allow themselves to do what the German people and the German Hitler's group did to other peoples. He said they were incredibly literate and incredibly intelligent, and yet they mass killed millions. So knowledge without character is worthless. Business without ethics. And that's why we're here this morning talking about ethics, is business. Business without ethics is a bad road to go down. Science without humanity. The gain of function thing, which has just come up in the media and in these labs. And what in the world were they doing that created a disease that was over and above worse than what was out there already? If they thought about these 7 things, Science without humanity is an evil and a very bad thing. Religion without sacrifice. So the foundational principles of religion require you to sacrifice. They're not talking about killing an animal. They're talking about what you have to give in order to get something back. And then politics without principle. This is a real, I could go on and I won't, but I could go on and on and on about politics without principle, where that's going and what that's done. I love a lot of the quotes of Martin Luther King and what he said and stood for. He was a real thinker, for sure. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Like I encouraged you earlier, say something. Tell people, bring it into the light. And the time is always right to do what is right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So justice shouldn't, they've got this blindfolded Lady Justice holding the weights and measures. Injustice it corrupts the entire system. You can't have people doing things that are illegal and figure, well, that's okay because of their status or their position or whatever. That's a terrible thing. I was reading, about Martin Luther King, and down in Alabama, when the civil rights movement was just starting up, they would take the young people that wanted to protest and they would train them. Remember I said practice, practice, practice? They took these young men and ladies and they put them in a cafe, and then they would have members of Friends of Martin Luther come in and they would spit at them and they would cuss them up one side and down and they'd flick ashes in their face, teaching them not to react. Don't respond. Don't fight. Don't lash out. And they did this for several weeks before they actually had the sit-in at the cafe where they went in and they experienced these things, but they were sure after that practice that they were not going to lash out and they weren't going to become an example on the newsreels of, these awful young people and what they're doing. I still just feel sick about the way they were treated in that day and time, where they were standing on an ethical, moral principle at that time. Okay. Yeah, a judgment according to standard of your time. Satisfying one's obligations or duties, just respecting others' rights. So, in ethical relativism, and as people are justifying their situation, you can pretty well always tell which side of ethics they're coming from. Okay, are they just trying to justify why they're burning down these government buildings or why they're breaking out windows down Central, or what's going on? And the ethical foundation is, well, because of these times that we're in and what's going on out there, you should be throwing rocks. My aunt has been marching in different stuff for the last 50 years. I mean, you get a good group together that want to go after the Air Force Base because of the fuel they released into the water system or whatever, she's going to be there. And I don't know where she came up with that. And I've not really seen changes in our society and in our culture because of a lot of those things. There's anger and there's frustration, but very rarely do we see changes. But she's been one of those marchers for her entire life, and she's been in jail half a dozen times. I mean, every time she says, I can't get a job, it's kind of like, well, yeah, they probably pulled your rap sheet, and they know, well, they don't know why you were in there, but it was probably this. Okay, we're at 50 minutes. Let's take a break and jump back into it.